Fuck, fuck, fuck. How does he know? How does Dave know about this? My marriage is over, I just know it. The courts will find Dave to be the primary caretaker of our children. He will be awarded custody. I will be a social pariah, shunned by virtually everyone in this church-going community. Forgiven by the priest with soft words, but with a judgmental look on his face, just as he did with Mary Skelton. She only lasted about 3 months or so after her husband found out about her affair. 3 lonely months when the rest of the community shunned her, even though the priest forgave her. This community really hates cheating spouses. I slammed on the brakes and screeched to a halt, stopping 2 meters away from colliding with a little girl who ran out into the road chasing a ball. She looked to be about 3, about the same age as my Paula. I was driving too fast, too absorbed in my enormous problem. The kid's mother scowled at me from the sidewalk, even though it was her fucking fault for not watching her kid. I looked around and saw that I was near a large park, 5 minutes from home. I suppressed my fears, drove with shaky hands another 200 meters and stopped before hitting someone absent-mindedly. How could Dave even think? No, it's stupid. Once Dave found out I was having an affair, it makes sense that he thought poorly of me and wanted to cover his bases. He may run a small newsroom from home, but that doesn't mean he's stupid. Far from it. As soon as he found out, of course, he thought it wasn't my first case and started doing DNA tests on the kids. But how the hell did he know? And Carl and I had been so careful. Thoughts reminded me of Carl. I picked up my phone and moved on to Carla, if Dave ever asked, a recently started coworker. My motto was to stay as close to the truth as possible. My message, "Can you talk?" As I waited for an answer, I kept kicking myself. Why, oh, why did I let this smooth-talking little asshole seduce me? No, come on, be honest, it's not fair. The way we slept together the first time wasn't seduction and is completely understandable. It happened when we were out of town. We had just spent 2 whole days negotiating an exhausting deal, celebrated with too much champagne, and fell into bed together. If I had settled on the first case, everything would have been fine. I would have had a secret that I would have regretted until my last day. A serious secret that could only hurt my husband and family. But I, or should I say, we, alas. We were both gripped by the excitement of sleeping with someone after more than 10 years of marriage. The allure of the illegality of it all, the thrill of the naughtiness, the excellence of realizing that we had cheated on our spouses and successfully hid it from 2 people who knew us so well, or not successfully hiding it, as it turns out. My musings were interrupted by a text from Carl. "No, having dinner with Mary and the kids." "What's the matter?" "Well, they say misery loves company." He knows. Dave knows about us. How the hell did Dave find out about this? We were incredibly discreet. Only got together when we were away, and that was only if we managed to get adjoining rooms. We never walked through the door of the same room together. Always used condoms, even the first time. We behaved completely normally both in public and when we were at home with our spouses. Zing. Damn. Mary is acting normal, so he didn't say anything to her. Do you think he will? How angry is he? I don't know. We haven't talked yet. I ran away as soon as I found out he knew. This time I didn't have to wait long for an answer. Please beg him not to tell Mary. Selfish little prick. Screw my marriage while it's none of his business. Asshole. I'll probably tell his wife if Dave doesn't. Like I said, misery loves company. So how did we get discovered? I made sure my love for my husband wasn't compromised. Didn't introduce any new positions or techniques I learned from Carl. Fucking chance. Sex with Carl was vanilla and uninspiring. It was smaller, held for less time, and nowhere near as varied as my Dave. In fact, if it hadn't been for the illegality of it all, it wouldn't have lasted the 6 times over the 7 months we'd actually had it. How unlucky that we were discovered before I was about to end our affair after our next trip in 2 weeks. Damn it. Focus, Megan. How we were discovered is irrelevant. We were exposed, and now my husband trusts me so little that he's doing DNA tests on our children. My mind went back 20 minutes to when I got home late, too late to enjoy dinner with my family. Thankfully, Dave worked from home, took the kids to school, and cooked dinner 6 nights a week. I was supposed to cook on Sundays, but I usually went out and got takeout. Let's just say cooking is not one of my strengths. As I walked through the door, I froze at the horrifying sight. Dave is sitting on one of the kitchen chairs with a cotton swab on a stick, wiping the inside of Jillian's. Our 5-year-old daughter's mouth with it. An open, sterilized bag lies on the table. Peter, our 7-year-old son, was also standing there, either waiting his turn or already finished. I had read enough stories and watched enough TV shows to know that I was watching the opening act of a DNA test. My initial reaction was rage. How dare Dave think the kids weren't his? I wasn't a whore, or was I? Knowing I needed to think about how best to get over it, I just turned and ran. Just before I did, Dave turned to look at me with a neutral expression. I brought my hands to my cheeks, remembering the sensation of the blood rushing off them, which was a blatant admission of the truth of what the testing had accused me of. 20 minutes later, here I am, reflecting on the destruction of my family and my community. I knew Dave. I knew him as well as he knew himself. As soon as he was ready to confront me, he did so firmly and calmly. He wouldn't want the whole town to know he'd been hornswoggled. If I can't stop him from divorcing me, I'll ask him to do it quietly, just to say we're estranged. That way, even if I lose my marriage, I can still stay in town and see my kids, perhaps sharing joint custody. I really do love them. My mind wandered for God knows how long, running through different scenarios of how Dave would react, trying to find the scenario that would allow me to lose the least. Suddenly, I realized that I was reasoning like a defeatist. I'm using my knowledge of Dave and assuming that a breakup would go without saying, and the best scenario would be a quiet divorce. But what if I'm wrong? What if I put myself at Dave's mercy? I tell him about the forgivable first time and the regrettable sequel. He doesn't want a divorce any more than I do. Sure, his faith in me will be shaken, and it will take years for him to fully trust me again, but I'll still have the respectability and support of the community. If you do this, Megan, you'll have to be completely honest with Dave. One whiff of a lie, and you'll get to the curb faster than a fast-footed cheetah. I glanced at my watch. Just under 2 hours had passed since I discovered that I hadn't been as clever at hiding my affair with Carl as I'd thought. 2 hours since I'd gone from being confident in my marriage to fighting for his very life. 2 hours since I'd seen my husband testing my children's DNA had raised my blood pressure 100 points. I quickly typed a message. I'm on my way home to apologize to you for my affair with Carl. Please don't do anything rash. Then slowly headed home in my car. Epilogue of Megan. Well, what happened after that surpassed my worst nightmare. 10 minutes after sending my text message, I made it home. As soon as I pulled into the driveway, Dave jumped out the door, tossed me, "Stay here and watch the kids," and sped off in his car, screaming. I found out later that he headed straight for Carl's house, and when my lover opened the door, broke his nose in one blow, screaming, "You're sleeping with my wife, aren't you?" Those words stopped Carl's wife calling the police, and together with Dave, they learned the whole story as Carl begged them to call him an ambulance. Since Carl said he had been hit and his wife claimed he had hit the wall himself, the police investigation went nowhere. By the time he returned from the hospital, the locks on his house had been changed, and his wife had made an online appointment with a divorce attorney. How do I know all this? Dave came straight home, told me to pack a bag and leave. Taking one look at the fire in his eyes and the bruises on his knuckles, guessing where they came from, I did as he asked, and fled to a mid-range motel. The next day, I saw a bandaged Carl at the bar at breakfast. All hopes that Dave would be quiet came crashing down early in the afternoon when Carl and I were invited into the chief operating officer's office and summarily executed. She didn't cite any morals because our contracts simply stated that she shouldn't hire scumbags like us. Oops. I realized what the immediate future would be like when I called all 3 divorce attorneys in our town, but no one returned my call. When I went to the diner for dinner, the waitress refused to acknowledge my existence. The nail in the coffin lid, however, was when I met with Carl and learned that family, friends, and former co-workers already treated him like a leper. Within 2 days, spurred on by a visit from the motel manager who stated that his establishment was fully booked, yeah, right, Carl and I accepted the inevitable and left town. We didn't want to become social ghosts, which we saw Mary Skelton become last year when she was caught cheating. We drove 300 kilometers and started a new life together. It didn't last long. I know I'm probably stating the damn obvious, but when 2 cheaters get together, there is no trust. Stupid. I never realized how important trust is in a relationship until tonight, when I had to fight the urge to check his phone while he was in the bathroom. By the time I finally worked up the courage to ask Dave if I could go back into town to visit the kids over the weekend, they had all found a replacement for me. He was perfect prey, and once he was on the loose, the vultures, being attractive singles and widows, declared their interest. By the time I cleaned myself up, there was already a nifty set of shoes under Dave's bed. My kids had a half-sister, and they were already calling the other woman Mom. Now that I'm too old to start another family, all I can do is sit and ponder the lonely life ahead of me. Epilogue of Dave. I lie here glancing at the bedside clock, 11:05 p.m. The soft breathing of Ruth lying next to me reminds me of our sexual marathon of the last 2 hours. Damn. Sex with someone new after 10 years with the same woman was good. Damn good. We did some things that were borderline inappropriate. Yeah, life is good, but it's a little weird. My wife cheated on me, but before I could mourn the demise of that marriage too much, I was seduced by a younger, prettier, and sexually more adventurous one. The surreal last day of my old marriage still confuses the hell out of me. Maybe if I digest it in my head for the 10,000th time, it will finally make sense. How'd it go? On the last day of my marriage, Megan came running home and without saying a word just turned around and left again. I heard her car start and drive away. I was busy for a few more minutes, and by the time I called Megan's cell phone, it was busy. Finding no sign of her presence, I started putting the kids to bed, and they were fast asleep. Unfortunately, the fact that they didn't see their mother before they went to bed was not unusual. I went into the kitchen and was just about to call Megan again when the house phone rang. An unrecognized cell phone number popped up on the display. The next few minutes, from memory, went something like this. "Hi, this is David Brown speaking." Hi Dave, it's Carl. I knew Carl, of course. He started working with my wife a while back. I had seen him at several work events and was even invited to his housewarming party. What was his wife's name? Rebecca, Beck? Something like that. Very handsome, well-built, and a couple years younger than Megan and me. Carl, on the other hand, seemed like a bore. Arrogant, smug, he looked down on me. A legend in his own mind. The last person I'd want to talk to after a hard day, which is why my next words probably didn't sound very friendly. "Yeah, Carl, what can I do for you?" What would it take? I had no idea what he was talking about, and in confusion I remained silent, forcing him to continue. "If my wife finds out I've been having an affair with Megan for the last 6 months or so, she'll cut my balls off and I'll lose my kids. So I'll be honest, Dave, what does it take to keep your mouth shut?" I don't remember dropping my phone and collapsing to the floor as the crushing news that my loving wife had betrayed me in the worst possible way hit my consciousness. I had suspected nothing and could not believe it. Yet the pleading in Carl's voice was quite compelling. My mind then turned to a recently, frequently discussed problem. Why had my wife seemed to have become emotionally distant from me and the kids over the past 6 months or so? Nothing drastic, just definitely something there. I later realized that the first stage of grief, denial, lasted less than 30 minutes. That stage was followed by anger. I was filled with a blind rage that masked the pain of my loss. I still had enough self-control not to snap at Megan. That led to prison. Her lover, however, was a completely different person. As soon as I heard Megan was back, I drove to the asshole's house and with all the anger I had, punched him. The feeling of bones and cartilage breaking under my fist made me smile even now. Carl's forced confession while his blood dripped was completely unnecessary for me, but necessary for his wife. Releasing my anger allowed me to go home and calmly tell Megan to fuck off. Listening to my woman's light snoring in bed, I realized I was no closer to solving the mystery than the last 100 times I'd thought about it. Why had Carl himself sown the seeds of the destruction of his own marriage by confessing to me when I was completely unsuspecting? Once again, I couldn't escape the thought that Megan's strange behavior that night when she'd come home from work and immediately run off without saying a word had something to do with all of this. I replayed that night in my head once more. I made dinner as I always did. Megan confirmed she would be late, so we sat and ate with the kids, chatting as usual. Then it started to clear up. Jillian complained that a spot in her mouth hurt. I grabbed a flashlight, turned her bottom lip down, and saw an ulcer. Walking over to our first aid cabinet, I grabbed a tube of Bonyella and one of the individually wrapped cotton swabs, opened, applied, and used the cream as directed. Absolutely nothing to do with the mystery at hand. Heck, I was beginning to suspect I'd never find out. Turning onto my side, I slid my arm under the sleeping beauty's head and cuddled her, kissing the back of her neck gently. She snuggled against me and purred lightly. To hell with the mystery, life is good.